What can a new microphone teach us about sounding like Christ? Well, let's talk about that. Welcome to the show. I'm Daniel Dalp, and this is For Your Sunday Morning Drive, the short podcast with the goal of providing some motivation, drive, and encouragement on your way to worship and helping you recenter your mind on those spiritual things on a hectic Sunday morning or whenever you listen. Before we get started today, I did want to do a short plug. I preach for the Hawesville Church of Christ in Hawesville, Kentucky. And recently, we've launched a podcast feed, which is going to be kind of a catch-all for all of our sermon uploads. So, if you're inclined and desire to hear more of me, which I can't imagine is going to be the case, I'll be putting a link in the show notes to the Hawesville Church of Christ podcast. I'd appreciate it if you check it out. Well, I think that takes care of announcements this morning. Let's go ahead and get the show on the road. This is episode 108, New Microphone, Good Shepherd. Let's go to church.
Are we there yet?
Those of you with a discerning ear might have noticed something different about the podcast over the last handful of episodes. You may have noticed my voice and my audio seems, quite frankly, to be all over the place. And there's a reason for that. I was recently able to upgrade my microphone from the budget mic that I started with to a new one with all the bells and whistles. It's pretty sweet. But the thing about bells and whistles is that they take some fine tuning to get them to sound the way you want, to sound the way I want. And I just haven't been able to dial it in just yet. But I'm not giving up. In fact, I have spent a shameful amount of time listening to my own voice in an attempt to make me sound just right. And, well, I still don't think I'm quite there yet. I still haven't found my voice, so to speak. Well, reflecting on how much time I've put into the fine-tuning of this microphone and thinking about the phrase, finding my voice, brings several things to mind. Primarily, have I been too concerned with how I sound to the world? Said another way, when people hear me speak, do they hear more of me or more of Jesus? Because that's the goal. The goal is, both in word and in deed, to sound and authentically be Christ-like. And then the question comes up, how do I fine-tune that? Or am I even concerned about it? Because if I'm being really honest, the temptation to just sound like and be like me on my own terms is really strong. The fine-tuning, in my mind, must start with learning the baseline, knowing who it is I want to sound like. In other words, I must know what Jesus sounds like in order to bring my voice into harmony with his. Jesus says this after declaring himself the Good Shepherd in John 10:27. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Do we know the voice of the shepherd? Do we know it well enough to follow him? Do we know it well enough to speak the things he speaks and walk the paths that he walks? Or does the pull of individuality tempt us to turn up our own volume, to try and overshout and overdo Jesus? Because our world is so caught up in individuality, in customizing every aspect of our lives at the click of a button. And if we're not careful, we'll begin to lose ourselves to it, to conform to it, to become indistinguishable from what we are supposed to be sanctified from. Romans chapter 12 verse 2 says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." We should be tempering. We should be working on ourselves, not to please the world, but to please God. And what, or who, pleases God more than his Son? So yes, let's not be concerned with finding our own voice, but with finding his. We should not merely walk like him, but talk like him. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21 through 25 gives us a pretty good idea of just what that looks like. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and the overseer of your souls. What did Jesus sound like? He sounded truthful, compassionate, courageous, gentle, firm when necessary, and full of grace. Yes, it's a tall order, but a worthy one, a necessary one. And when it is so easy for people to hear things in us like bitterness, anger, sarcasm, and unjust criticism, how refreshing must it be for them to simply hear Jesus? So, while that old microphone sounded like me, my hopes for the new one is that it sounds more like Jesus. And if that's the goal, then I don't think I'll ever be done fine tuning. I just pray I get closer every week. Well, those are my thoughts for your Sunday morning drive. Now it's time to hear yours. Our discussion questions for this week are: when people hear me speak, do they hear more of me or more of Jesus? What is one habit in my life that needs fine tuning this week? And how can I intentionally turn up the volume on Christ in both my words and actions today? Hey, thank you for listening. Thank you so much for taking time and checking us out, making us a part of your Sunday morning routine. Keep working on sounding like Jesus, and I'll see you Sunday.
We're here.